So I'm going to read from chapter 2 in the book. And I suppose it doesn't really recommend one's novel to say not much has happened in chapter 1. But I don't really have to tell you all that much. Flora Dempsey, our heroine, has returned to Darwin, which is a small New England college town, upon the sudden death of her father, who was the president emeritus of Darwin College and also a professor there. And so she has impulsively quit her job and moved into her father's house. She has arrived the night before and sort of taken an inspection of the house, realized that she had totally forgotten about her father's dog, who will appear in this chapter, whose name is Larks. So I was relieved to find that someone else remembered Larks, and Larks is not dead. And another name that comes up is Georgia, who is Flora's childhood best friend. The book moves between a year in Flora's life when she's 28 and when she's 8 in the same town. And I think that's all you need to know. Oh, and when she impulsively left her job and moved, she packed a suitcase, which she refers to as the body bag. So that's what she means. So this chapter is called Paris, Athens, Rome, Darwin. She woke up ravenous and disoriented. She'd eaten nothing but broth in days, her insides aslosh in briny liquids. Had she eaten at all yesterday? Her dreams had been someone else's, his maybe. Dreams full of people she didn't know, weather she'd never encountered. Even lying down, she was lightheaded, her jaw stiff and sore as an old man's joints from a busy night of clenching. Where was she? So many times Flora had wished to run away, to leave everyone she knew, everything but her own skin behind, even her own skin if she could. But she had never managed it unless you counted the time nearly 20 years ago when she and Georgia ran away from school, or the time a year later when she did it again, alone. But then she had run away to the house she lived in, and now, if you thought about it, she had done the same thing, run away to her father's house, run away home. Her house. She was a landowner, a mint member of the landed gentry, a different Flora financially than she'd been a month before. In addition to leaving Flora the house, which he owned free and clear, and his pension and savings minus $5,000, which went to Mrs. J., who's his housekeeper, her father had named her his literary executor, the most formal title ever bestowed on her, a grown-up title. It was all very organized. He was a gentleman till the end. But what did it mean to inherit words? All those orphaned words, words she did not want to read. She was their guardian. They were peeking sorrowfully out at her from their manila folder in her suitcase downstairs and from the piles on the study desk, woeing their bad luck in life in ending up with her. His LPs he'd left to Ruby, his best friend, Ira Rubinstein, with the exception of his opera collection, which went to Flora. And most of the books also went to Flora, except his first editions and other rare things which he'd left to the college. Nothing from me after all those years of service, her mother had asked, only half a joke. Flora grabbed her sneakers and coat from their puddle on the floor and went downstairs. From the body bag she extracted fresh shirt and socks. In the downstairs bathroom she doused her face and examined it. Not too deranged, certainly not for Darwin. She closed the front door without locking it and walked into town. Darwin in November looked bleak, the streets emptied of life as though posing for a hopper. The cursed spot next to the post office, which welcomed a new restaurant of some new ethnicity with every passing season, was in a Burmese incarnation. The art house movie theater, still playing its obscure Romanian films, as desultory as ever, how was it hanging on? A front, surely. Maybe all the businesses surrounding the town common were mere facades, elaborate stage sets of the cozy academic enclave. One solid push would knock them over. The banner above Pleasant Street advertised an out-of-date anti-Columbus Day rally. At Gus Simon's shop, Flora filled a basket with milk and eggs, bread and coffee. Hungry for the first time in days, she couldn't see past breakfast. Gus's had long been the place to buy basics, the makings of a modest meal, new notebooks for school, greeting cards, Halloween costumes, and green and gold Darwin College paraphernalia. Flora's favorite t-shirt growing up had been one that listed Paris, Athens, Rome, Darwin, Next to each word stood a simple rendering of the iconic structure, Eiffel Tower, Parthenon, Colosseum, and the college library. As with so many Darwinian outputs, it was difficult to read the tone, self-deprecating or self-important. Gus was a man of indeterminate age. He could pass for 50, but then again he might be nearing his 70s. His colorless hair matched the morning, not quite gray, though no longer blonde, a little like her father's hair. His face had the wide wrinkles of a man who spent his days outside in the sun. He looked misplaced, caged almost, standing behind his register. "Flora," he said gently, recognizing her as she pulled her hat off. "Gus," she said back. "You've come home." "Here I am," she said. "I miss your old man," he told her. "Really, I do. This town won't be the same without him. You know, he came in here with larks for the paper every morning at 7, like clockwork. Often my first customer. My first words spoken were to him. We started our days together." Flora added the local newspaper, the Daily Darwin Gazette, to her pile of groceries. It was nearly 11. "Where is Larks, anyway?" Gus asked. "Oh, back at the house." The little lie easier than explaining. "Sports scores," Gus went on. "We spent a lot of time on that. He liked to talk games and to hear them recounted. We filled each other in on what we'd missed." Her father had been famous in her family, if one can be famous among two other people, for the enthusiasm with which he offered meticulous plot summaries of films and books. The telling often took longer than the watching or reading. Most of all, he loved to reveal surprise endings. "Are you planning to see it?" he'd ask. An answer of yes was clearly wrong, disappointing and a little rude. "How long are you staying?" Gus asked. "Not sure, as long as it all takes, I guess." An evasion, but Gus nodded. "You'll let me know if you need anything, I hope." He awkwardly handed her the bag. "It's on me, Flora." "Don't be silly. How much do I owe you?" "No, I mean it. Don't say another word. You know how your dad always overpaid. When he said keep the change, too often that meant change for a 20 off $12 of tennis balls. I owe him." "This once," Flora said. "Then we call it even. I pay my way or I stop coming back." Gus grinned at her. "You'll be back. This is Darwin, Flora. Where else will you go?" Leaving the shop, Flora thought she saw Esther Moon, a lost friend from high school, parking. Flora recognized the car first, an enormous, old, weirdly symmetrical Chevy, like a child's drawing of a car, the ugliest car ever made, Esther had liked to say. She bought it for $1 from a Darwin historian who'd been desperate to be rid of it. The car couldn't still be alive. It couldn't have outlived her father, was Flora's thought. But then there was a car seat in the back with a child inside, a further impossibility. Esther Moon could not be a parent. A friend Flora considered more responsible had gotten pregnant the year before at age 27, and a part of her had been shocked to find it not a scandal requiring adult intervention and furious gossiping. When had pregnancy, of all things, become acceptable? And even if that mother were Esther, talking to her now, answering questions like, "How are you?" was not an option. Flora didn't know how to answer the standard questions anymore. How are you? What are your plans? Where do you live? For the time being, all were stumpers. Easier not to be asked. She'd never understood with those questions anyway how much honesty people wanted in return. She decided on the long way back through campus. The air was cool but fresh. The leaves were down and gone, but the grass on the common clung to the last of its New England green. She could see the tall rhododendron bushes barricading the president's house, but she crossed the street and walked toward the quad instead. An eerily peopleless landscape. Where were the students? Where the professoriate? But what did she want? She dreaded chance encounters with people she'd once known, those warm smiles of recognition homing in on her, missile-like. But then she felt disgruntled if she made it through without being cited.